Okay, now the big one for today, performance tuning script. Okay, someone asked me regarding this one in the yesterday session, so I want to add this one as a part of today's session. So we might going to spend like next 20 minutes in this, or if I have some time, I will try to squeeze this question too. But let's go to this performance tuning script. Okay, so I think this is, I have already mentioned in my first session in Linux that regarding the performance tuning, we rely on four parameters, right? Those are CPU, memory, disk, or I will say IO. The last one is the network. Okay. And just to say network in terms of your system, not the network like we have this LAN and WAN. Just I'm focusing on my Linux system. Okay. And for each and everything, I need to set up some kind of a threshold. Okay. So let's say if I have a system, I will say if the CPU utilization goes beyond this point, then trigger an alert. Or if the memory utilization goes more than this percent, trigger an alert. You got the picture, right? So I need to set up some kind of a threshold. Okay. And for example, in case of CPU, I'm setting a threshold 0.70%. So what I mean by 70%, let's say if I have a two CPU system and I will say 0.7 is equal to 1.4%, right? Or let's make it simple. Let's say I have a 10 CPU system and I'm putting it as a 0.70. So if I will say 0.7 is equal to 7. So if my load utilization goes more than 7, trigger an alert or send out an email. Okay. Memory, I'm setting it as a 90% because as much data which is present on a cache, it is good for us, right? Good for us means good for the kernel because kernel does not need to go back to the disk and retrieve the data. So we can get the data out of the memory. So I will say the as much data which is present on RAM, I'm more than happy with that. This, I will rely on something called a weight parameter. So if you remember last time, I'm going to show you guys again. In the top command, we have the weight column. And if this weight is more than 0, that means there are some IO which is still waiting on the queue need to be processed by the disk. Okay, or waiting to be processed by the CPU. So this is not a good indication. So I will say anything which is greater than 0, I will trigger an email. And the last one is network. Network, I showed you something called if config command, and where we have the receive and transmit error. Again, for this one, I will say if it is greater than 0, that means I have some kind of a drop or error in my network interface card, that there are some packets which are getting dropped. Okay, so I set up a scenario, and this is how we are going to write our script. But before that, any question before we start writing the script? Or I will say we will build the logic, how I am going to approach to the script, and then we are going to look at the script, how to build that. Any questions so
Prashant,
far? Mhm.
yeah, could you please explain the CPU part again? That how we are considering this threshold parameter?
Or Mohit, can I explain it in the with the help of a command line, and then it will be much clearer for you guys?
Yeah, sure, sure.
Sure. Okay. So let's look at the CPU part, which Mohit is mentioning. Let's start with the CPU. That is our first parameter. So first thing is CPU, right? Now, if I ask you guys, like, what is exactly the CPU utilization of this current system, how you are going to find it out? That's the first question for you guys. I want to make this session interactive. So in this case, if I have this Linux system, I can show you. Yes. Yeah, Mohit, that is absolutely right. So I can start with this W command. Okay. Just really, really careful. Your top command executed in loop. Okay. Let's forget about top command. Let's start with the W command and then we will go with the top command. So I executed this command called W. And W, last time I mentioned that it shows you the current time, the uptime for the system, how many users are logged in. And the important part for it is called load average, right? Load average for 1 minute, 5 minutes, and 15 minutes. Okay. I'm not going to worry about the 5 or 15 minutes. I want to see what is the load utilization because I want to see it as real time as possible. So in this case, my first task is to get this value. Okay. Now the question for you guys, how to get this value. So I executed this W command. My first task is to get this value. How to get it? Yeah, Bhautik. MP stat is good. I don't know if MP stat is a part of the native package. No. And once again, guys, there is no right or wrong answer. We are just trying to build the logic, right? Like how we are going to approach these kind of a problem. And this you can apply to any problem. So yeah. Oh, it comes from the systat family. Yeah. So MP stat, we can use that. But I want to make it really simple. So let's start with the W command. And the idea is to extract this column or extract this field. How to get that? Wake up, guys, wake up. Yeah, Bhautik. Before we approach to the that cut command, okay, let me start and then I will ask you the next question. I want to get the this line. Cut and everything, it is going to come later, right? First, I need to get the that line itself. And the way I'm going to get this line is head -1. So from head, get the first line. Tail -1 is going to give you the last line, right? This one. I'm not interested in this last line. I'm interested in the first line. Yeah. Tail -3, you can do that. But in case if you have a multiple columns or multiple lines, you don't know, right? Here I know for sure that this is going to output the 3 line. But I want to approach with a simple approach. Tail -3 definitely going to work. But I know that this output is always been displayed in the first line. Okay. Now the next thing is, now we got this line. What will be the next approach that you guys are talking about? Jaideep, I will not go with the regular expression. Regular expression may be complicated for this scenario. But like I mentioned, there's no right or wrong answer, whatever approach you want to follow. So my next task is it is still the same. I still need to get this one. How to get this particular value? So awk 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh, sorry. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So we need to get this ninth column. And print $9. And yesterday we have spoke about it that for awk, the default field separator is a white space. So we don't need to specify this -f is equal to this white space. You can do that, but there's no need for that, right? So now we got this column 007. But I still have one issue, right? Because the load is constantly going to change. So that's why you are seeing this different value. But if I run this awk again, I'm going to get this value 006, right? Are you guys seeing any issue with the output that we have received? Exactly. So we have this. Yes, we can remove TR definitely. Any other ways, a simple way we can do it? Let's say I'm not aware of the translate command. And you guys already mentioned about that command. Cut. So for cut, I want the first field, but yesterday we have talked about it. In case of cut, the by default separate field separator is tab. So in this case, I can do this. So what this is going to do, it is saying that extract the first field with using wherever you have seen this D as a field separator. So for this cut command, this is the first field, and whatever after that, it is going to be the second field. So if you do 2, there is nothing after 2, right? Sorry, after this value. So basically, we want to get the first field before this comma. Okay. So we build our first expression that we are able to get this CPU value. That for the 1 minute interval, my CPU utilization is 0.001. Okay. So now the second task, which I was telling is to Mohit, that in the standard case, what we can do, okay, let's copy this value. Our requirement is depending upon the number of CPU which is present on my system, if the load utilization, so let's say if I have a 10 CPU which is present on my system, and I will say a standard threshold of 0.7, okay, which comes out as a 7. So if I say if the load utilization, if it is greater than 7, I'm just putting some standard value. You can put it as 0.8 or 0.6 or 0.5. If you say that if the load utilization is greater than 5, it will send a mail. Okay, so I'm just throwing out some value. But my first question is, I need to see the number of CPU which is present on this system. Okay, the similar way we have get this value. What do you guys think how to get the number of CPU which is present in this system? So I want to see in this system how many CPUs are present. Is there any way to get that value? Yes, LS CPU is one of the way. But the problem with the LS CPU that it is not installed by default. So if you go with this approach, and what exactly you need to do? Grep for the CPU, and then you need to escape this value. Oh, we still has that. And then you need to use something called off. We got this value that this system has 2 CPU. Okay. Yes, proc CPU info is another way. But there you need to do some extra stuff. So for example,
We can use the nproc also.
yep, that's the perfect answer. nproc is the most simplest way. You can use nproc to see the number of CPU which is present on the system. So both the two methods we have discussed, ls CPU as well as cat proc CPU info. Here we can grab for this processor field. Okay, and then we need to do the arithmetic calculation to add these two values. So that is also doable. Or what Mohit has mentioned, we can use the command called nproc. Okay, so now we got these two values. We got number of CPU and the load currently present on the system. Okay, so now we can multiply this with this 0.7 value, and we will set a max CPU that this system can get is 1.4. That is the limit which we are setting it up. Again, I said it's depend upon your requirement. If you said that if it is go beyond 1, then send out an email. But standard industry practice is 0.7. That means your system is optimally utilized. Okay. Now, just in the interest of time, let me show you the code. And then we will go to the other part, like how to do it for memory and everything. So I started with a function called CPU check. Okay. This is, I know, the old way of defining the function. Most of the people nowadays, they are defining the function just by doing this CPU check and the function name. Even you don't need to specify these brackets uh, when using a function. But I always prefer to define this function because that way I will see that, okay, I'm defining a function. We calculate the load average the way we have calculated. Then we have this number of cores, which I'm putting it in a value, in a variable. Maximum load, we have calculated like this, 0.7 into number of cores, the way we have talked about it. And I am piping it to something called BC. Anyone know what is this BC is all about? What is the use of BC and what exactly it does? BC stand for bash calculator. Okay. So if you look at our use case, we have this 001, right? The CPU utilization 001. Anyone who's using bash for some time, you know that earlier we used to, like, if I need to do these calculation, arithmetic calculation, we have the ways, like I can do it with the help of something called declare. I can do it with the help of let or expr. We have used it earlier. If you look at some of the older bash script, you see that all these calculation is done with the help of this one. Now the new way of doing it is put it inside this double brackets. But the limitation of this, it only hold true for integers. So if I need to do integer as well as the float calculation, in that case, I need to use something called BC or bash calculator. So this will perform both float and integer calculation. Okay. So if you look at here, that's what we are doing. That if the same thing which I've told you, 0.7 to the number of cores, putting it into a BC. So that's what I have put the maximum load value. Okay. Now we are saying this load average, which comes out to be like this value, this one. If this value is greater than maximum load, which we have calculated, this I have set it up as a value like this should not increase more than this value. Then I'm again, because I know this can be a float value. If this is equal to 1, then I will say this is load average is high. Or I can put it as a greater than the specific value and I will say this is high. So basically the whole of this calculation is happening here. So if this value is greater than that particular value, this load average is greater than the maximum load, then I will say, and this will return 1. And I will say, if this is equal to 1, then I will say, okay, my load average is definitely high. The reason I need to put this BC and all those things, because I am dealing with the floating point value. If you are not dealing with any floating point value, then you can simply say, okay, this value, if this is greater than this particular value, say the load average is greater than, your system is experiencing some kind of a CPU issue. Okay. Same thing is with other. Okay. So let's do it for memory. At least I will do the basic ground stuff and then we will see. So now I'm clear with terms of CPU. Rather than looking at memory or IO, let's look at something called a network, right? So network, we run this command called ifconfig, right? For ifconfig, let's look at these parameters, this RX error and TX error, which is called receive error as well as transmit error. Okay. And any one of you guys, if you guys attended my previous session, I have mentioned that ifconfig command is not by default installed on the system. Okay. So we need to first see if the ifconfig command is present, and if it is not, then install it. Okay. And this is again based on your security requirement. If your security does not allow it, don't do it. So how can I check if the ifconfig command is present? Do you guys know, like, is there any way I can check if this command is present in my system or not? Where is config? So you will see that if config is present here, there is also a command called which if config. There you can see if the if config is present. I can use a command called command itself to see if config is present. Or I can do something like command -v to see if config is present. So there are multiple ways to check if the if config command is present or not. Okay. Yeah, I can do uh, RPM-QA. Jaideep, you need to know which package is responsible for this. So for example, it will be a little bit tricky. So basically, we need to know the package name, right? Net-tools. So that is going to be a little bit tricky. You need to know ahead of time. Whereas where is which or command, here we know the simple way that, okay, if I can do this, and if I know this command -v if config, and if my exit code comes out to be a 0, I know this command is present or not. Like yesterday, we have discussed a lot about the exit code. So this is a simple way to check if the command is present or not. So let's go to this. So here I use this command -v to check if the command is present or not. You can use which, you can use various, whatever you are flexible with. Just use that particular utility to see if the command is present or not. And if it is not, that's what I'm using exclamation sign, which is say opposite of that. So if the command is not present, and then I have added few conditions. So one of the condition is to check for this particular file, which is CentOS-release. The reason for doing this is I just want to make sure that this script works on CentOS, or if this is a Ubuntu-based system, this I'm going to check for this particular file. And the reason we need to check all these things because the way we are going to install a package on a particular operating system is different. So for example, in case of CentOS, we can do it with the help of a yum. Now, if you look at the newer version of CentOS, not CentOS, but Red Hat, they have replaced yum with something called DNF. But that we can modify the script. But in case of CentOS, we have yum, whereas in case of Ubuntu, we have something called apt-get. So what we are trying to check it over here to check if this if config command is present. If it's not, just install it based on the operating system. Okay. And this is my next thing, which I want to discuss it over here. Script to set up a development environment. So with development environment, I mean, you can replace the same logic with something else. So for example, if you want to provide some system to a developer and you want to see that if Git is installed, okay, or the other important package is Python-pip, right, to install all the like a Python modules. So you can use the same logic. First, you can check if that git command is present. If it's not, then install it based on the OS. Okay. So what I mean to say, you can use command or various whatever -v git. And if this exit code is non-zero, then install that particular package. So this is how you are going to build the logic through which you can set up a development environment for your system or for your developers. So we are done with that. Now the next step is config command, right? And we need to find out this Rx and Tx value. Okay. Now you guys probably knows how to get this value. And so far you have seen shell script is nothing. We are just putting all the commands into a file, but we are just doing some parsing. And based on that parsing, we are getting the output, something like that, right? So now my first requirement is I want to get this Rx and Tx error. But before that, I have one more requirement. You see that when I am executing this if config command, I am getting this LO also, which is a loopback adapter. So I don't need this loopback adapter. I just want to get the output for this EN5 adapter. And we have even discussed it about it, like from where this EN5 is coming. If you remember, udev rules.d 70 persistent rule. So this is coming from here, right? Okay, so let's forget about this. My first aim is to remove this value, right? And the second aim is to get this Rx error and Tx error. How to get this? Okay. So here in the if config output, you see that we are getting both these interface EN5 as well as L0. So I just want to get the output of this EN5, not loopback adapter. And the second thing is I just want to get the RX as well as TX error field. How to get this? Yes. So if I use this ENS5, I will only get this ENS5 value. Now my question is how to get this particular ENS5 value. Like in the script, I cannot do this ENS5 because in some system it is ENS5, in some system it can be ENS6 or ENS1. So I first need to get this value. How to get this? IPA is other way, but that is not going to solve my issue. I'm still going to get this LO and this. I basically want to pass this field. Okay. Just in the interest of time, I will say we are again going to do this one, but I will say head-1, right? Here I know that the first field is ENS5. So how I'm going to get this? Awk is print $1, right? ENS5. And again, I can cut it. But here I can do something like this. I haven't tried this one, but let me try that. But here we do something smart. We know that ENS5 is ending with this colon, right? So rather than using the default field separator for awk, which is like white space, we know that if anything which is starting with this one or ending with this one, we can use it as a field separator. And then we are printing this value, right? So now we have got this value. Yes, we can pass it to our script. So let's say we have got this value, ENS5. Now my aim is to get this RX error. So which is, I know, which is going to be pretty simple. So what I can do, I can grab for field called RX error, right? And then in that RX error field, I can simply off the print 0, 1, 2, 3. 3, right? Which is 0. Similarly, for TX error, I can grab this TX error field. Okay. So what is the use of all these things? Let's go back to our script. So here we have seen that if the package is not installed, we have installed it. Here we have grabbed that interface value. I know I can cut this one or I can make it short by using awk-f and put this as a field separator. We got the RX error count, we have got the TX error count, and now I can simply put this inside the if condition. We have said that if any of these value is greater than 0, I will say there is some issue. Okay. So here I say that if RX error count is greater than 0. Here, if you can see, I'm not using all the BC calculator and everything because I know that the error field is always be in the integer. It's not cannot be in the float. I will not say that my error is 0.7, that there is 0.7 packet which is getting dropped. It has always been 0, 1, 2, 3, or whatever the value is, right? So I will say if RX error is greater than 0 or any one of this is greater than 0, then at least display this to my screen. Or if you look at below, I have created this something called this function called send mail, where you can put recipient, subject, body, and basically send the email. And I'm calling a main function over here, where for any of these conditions, if it is met, just send out an email. Okay. So same logic you need to apply for all the other things. For example, this memory check, I have set up a threshold at 90. From grep proc-mem info, you can get this mem total, mem available. Do the memory utilization, like is total memory minus available memory divided by total memory. And if that is greater than threshold, send out an email. Okay. In the case of IO check, you need to do a little bit smartly. Like I mentioned, in the case of a top command, you have a field called wait. And if this value is greater than 0, we will say that there is some wait which is going on. So top command by default, it goes into kind of an infinite loop, right? It keep on coming to your screen. So what exactly you need to do in case of a top command is you need to use it in a batch mode. So if you use top with -b, and I say that I only need one repetition of this one, not the multiple time it is going, you will got a one single output. Okay, many people don't know that you can run top in a batch mode. So now you got only one output. Now again you need to do some logic. So for example, you can need to count 1, 2, 3. So in the third line, I'm getting this value. So I will say head hyphen not 2 hyphen 3. Now you got this one. Out of this, you can get tail hyphen 1. Now you got this line. Now you need to use awk and print that particular number. So I will say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, sixth line or seventh line where I'm getting this value. Oh, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I think it's 10. You're getting this 0.0, this weight. So once you got that value, you again need to use the logic if IO weight is greater than 1, because we are seeing that IO weight is in the float. So that's why we again you need to use BC, need to calculate that value. And if this is high, you can either display it on the screen or same way you can send out an email. Okay. So basically you need to know how to parse the data. And once you know how to parse the data, you can just need to put it on your shell script and put it in some kind of a conditional block like this if, or you better to create some function for each and every block. Like you can create a separate function like the way I have done it for this network, for IO, for memory, and for CPU check. Okay. And before I let you guys go, I want to show you one more script. I will put it on the chat also. This is a script to set up your environment, development environment. So basically, the same thing which we have done it for the if config command. Basically, you need to see if that command is present. If not, depending upon your operating system, do a different ways to install it. Yeah, this script, you have raised a good point. This script might going to fail if you have a multiple interface present in your system, because this script is only going to get the first interface. So in case if you have a multiple interface, you might need to do some more stuff to that script to get all the value of those interfaces. Okay, coming back to this, now you need to add the logic, right? Like find it out if this is present, if not, how to install it. So for example, if you need to install the AWS CLI, you need, if you check that Python pip is installed or not, if not, install it, then you can just do pip3 AWS CLI and all those things.